Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 228 of the SoxProspects.com podcast. We are the web's number one source for information on the Boston Red Sox farm system from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Worcester, across the Pike to Fenway, and all stops in between. Thank you for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield, and I'm the executive editor of SoxProspects.com, and I'm joined, as always, by our director of scouting and playoff entropy probabilities for chaos, Ian Kundle. Ian, we have... Well, 3 and call it a half games left in the regular season right now. Score me. What's the score right now?
It's 6-2 Baltimore.
That's not good. Not good. No. And the end of 7. So that's bad. That's what we in the business call a bad thing.
Yes. Especially when Alexander Wells made the best start of his career. It's the first time he's gotten out of 3 innings or something.
Yeah, it's
not great.
Not good at all. Meanwhile, the Yankees are beating the Blue Jays, which is actually a good thing, I would argue.
Yeah, you have to, at this point, you have to be, because you're not, you have to be rooting for the Yankees in that situation.
Which I'm sure people would disagree with, but I would disagree with those people.
If you want the Red Sox to make the playoffs, the Yankees winning is the best outcome of that. Because if they lose today and the Blue Jays lose, they're still a game ahead of the Blue Jays. They'll just be tied with Seattle.
Mm-hmm. Who's off tonight.
Correct.
The Red Sox finish up this weekend in Washington. We'll talk about the end of the Red Sox season, playoff-ish type stuff. Playoffs? What do you mean playoffs? What do you mean playoffs? We'll talk about what could happen. We'll talk about... I don't know, Bobby Dahlbeck playing second base. Let's get weird, Ian. Let's talk about some weirdness. We're not going to do minor league end of season wrap up quite yet. We're going to save that because the AAA season is still going. We'll check in on the dollar in the cookie jar. Worcester Red Sox, almost at Pawtucket. Worcester Red Sox and what's going on down there during the final stretch, capital F, capital S, final stretch of the AAA season. And
we're not going to check in on the DSL.
I guess we could check in on the DSL.
Kidding.
That's true. No, I mean, Miguel Blaze came back. That's a good thing. Yeah. And actually, we do have DSL-ish stuff to talk about now that you mentioned that, so thank you for the reminder. And we will also talk about your emails. As always, you can email us at podcast@soxprospects.com. We want to talk about what you want to hear about. We've got some really good questions this week, including, I'm glad we got one question, Ian, about the minor league rules testing that they did this year for our last episode. We punted on it because we didn't really know anything. Well, Baseball America helped us out and came out with an article literally today or yesterday, I think, discussing how the minor league rules changes came out. So we'll talk about those a little bit, as well as all of your emails. So send those in to us. Ian, I guess we should say for the off season, we haven't talked about it. I think I feel comfortable saying, and I'm sure you agree, we're not going to keep up weekly episodes during the off season. I guess in theory we could. I don't know what the hell we're going to talk about.
I mean,
we can talk about the winter leagues, but no one's going to care.
No, I think people will care. We'll play it by ear.
I don't think a weekly update on Joey Meneses in Mexico is really going to
No, but when the fall league's going, because the thing I'm slightly concerned about, and which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, is we might have a few months where there's not a lot to talk about.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that's true.
Trying
by
to strike
that
you
mean next spring. You mean next spring?
Well, no, because spring minor league ball will actually happen, so
that's
it'll be
true.
Fine.
That's
I'm just
true.
talking about from December 1st to about March 15th.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right.
Yeah,
I think it'll be longer, but we'll see.
But no, that's the time period I'm worried about.
Minor league
baseball
will come
will
back.
start around 15th. Yeah.
I guess there'll be fewer people in spring training. It'll be safer. I don't know.
Exactly. But so that's why I'm kind of thinking we'll talk about it often.
We will. But that said, if we'll keep an eye out on Twitter. Keep in mind you can follow Ian at Ian Kundle. That's IANCUNDALL. You can follow me at SP Chris Hatfield and follow the site at Sox Prospects. And of course, if you want to support the website and the podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/Sox Prospects. You can pledge a certain amount per episode. Get some neat perks out of it. I am behind on uploading Ian's game updates from Salem. I will get that done. If not tonight, then tomorrow night. We're recording this on Thursday the 30th because things got crazy on me this week. So
if he doesn't update them and you're a Patreon, just feel free to yell at him on Twitter.
Just yell at me on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, you just join the chorus. I'll just mash that mute button on all y'all. So no, I won't do that to patrons.
He's kidding, for the record.
I mean, I mashed the mute button. I just won't do that on Patreon supporters. So fair enough. Yeah, the mute button on Twitter is the most underutilized feature of anything in the world right now.
I don't think I've ever used it.
I
I'll
use
be
it
honest.
all the time. It's great.
Yeah.
It's terrific. Anyway, all right, Ian. Let's talk about this team. The Red Sox have 3 games left after tonight down here in DC. Right now, it is still 6-2, top 8.
Yeah. Not good.
It's not great, but that said, they still are in the driver's seat. Entering tonight, the Yankees had an 81% chance of making the playoffs. The Red Sox had a 67% chance of making the playoffs. The Blue Jays 29%, Seattle 22%. The biggest swing in a changing of a playoff scenario would happen if Baltimore beats Boston tonight. That would be a disaster. It would change their playoff projection. It would drop it by 21%. So at that point, 50, they would 50. It would be 46. Yeah. So call it a coin.
Because I think that's because I believe if it's a 2-team tiebreaker between them and Seattle, they would have to go to Seattle, I believe. Is the thing.
Did they lose the series? I thought the Red Sox won the series.
All I know is I was just going off of Cotillo tweeted how he could have to go to like Washington, Seattle, to like the entropy scenario involved the Red Sox going to Seattle. So I'm just basing it off that. So if it's wrong, not my fault. But
fair.
Yeah, no, I think that it's obviously not good. Like they needed to sweep the series or win 2 of 3, and they're on pace to lose 2 of 3.
Yeah. It's not great. Not great, Bob.
No. Great. And I think that we're seeing is the bats have just gotten cold at the wrong time. Like, I mean, we talked about it, and you mentioned it earlier about Bobby Dahlbeck, 1 for 16 in his last 6 games. Like, this is what's going to happen. You know, guys like him get super hot, then they get super cold.
Right. Verdugo's not doing a ton right now.
Struggling. Schwarber's not been great. Bogarts
has
been terrible for a while. Like, the bats have gone quiet, and these rookie pitchers who have like 9 ERAs are, throwing quality starts against the Red Sox, and that just can't happen this late in the season. And, when they go to Washington, they still, I think, if you can sweep Washington, you got a pretty good chance. But the problem is, you're just lessening your margin for error because Toronto has Baltimore next, and Toronto, mashes. Seattle has LA next, and, they've been playing really well of late. Like, but if you lose this game, it's out of your own hands. You can't outright win the wild card spot. You're going to need Seattle to lose. So yeah, right. Bogarts just grounded to a double play to end the 8th. Oof, he's been really struggling lately.
And when you look at the Nats series this weekend, it's Erod on Friday, Sale on Sunday. We don't know who's starting on Saturday, do we?
I mean, no, I don't think so.
Oh, because you know what? This makes sense now. The Worcester starter for Saturday is listed as Connor Siebold or Kyle Hart. And I bet there's a chance that Siebold is your starter on Saturday.
Which is not great. I mean, his stuff was definitely down compared to what it was earlier in the season, his last time around. But yeah, you're right. They don't have...
I mean, Houck last pitched on Tuesday. So Houck in theory could start.
But he's only thrown 2 innings his last, 2 innings at
41
most his
pitches.
Last. So he could go probably 65, 70.
I mean, maybe you call Siebold up and you tag team them.
I mean, yeah, I think it'll be pretty clear to be a bullpen game. But, the Whitlock IL stint, it's just, we're seeing the lack
IL stint hurts.
We're seeing the lack of the starting pitching depth is coming up right now. And it's what we talked about with Houck. Like, I didn't want to be right, but there's a reason they've moved him to the pen. He's not starting anymore. Like, they're seeing the same things that we were when it comes to him. Like, someone like I think maybe they hope that that Siebold could come up and grab it, but his stuff is significantly down compared to what it was earlier in the season. Like, he was in that deep debut, he was 90 to 92. When I saw him back in April pre-injury, he was 93 to 95.
Right.
And since he got back, his velocity's been down. His secondary stuff hasn't been as crisp. Like, he's still, I don't think, healthy 100%. And they just don't have those depth arms. And that's kind of what I was talking about. I mentioned on Twitter today, like, they really could use someone like Brian Mata right now. Either as kind of a shot in the arm in the bullpen as that, guy just comes out throwing gas to lengthen the bullpen, or even potentially as a starter, because right now, if you look at their 40-man options in the minors, it's literally Seabold, Phillips Valdez, who's coming off the COVID list and rehabbing and not really an option, and Jay Groom. Those are the only players on the pitchers on the 40-man in the minors right now. Like, they have nothing left to call up. So it's just a tough situation. And if they can piece it together and get into the playoffs, obviously they would prefer to do that. But I think as we kind of like looking back on what we talked about earlier in the year, even just being at this point, I think makes it a successful season. It's just, I think the way it's going to end is going to leave a sour taste in people's mouths. When I think looking back in a few weeks' time, that narrative might shift a little more bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's why, when we look back at this, you and I both had 80-something win totals for this team. They're going to win 90 games probably.
I would like to say that I had the highest projected win total of us, and also if you looked at the list Red Sox stats tweeted out, I had the highest projected total on that. No big deal.
God, don't hurt your back too hard, dude.
I mean, it was a good projection. It was 86 games or something like that. I don't remember. 88 maybe.
It was 86. I had 84.
It was 86.
I've had it in my intro document all year.
That's funny. But I think that looking back, given when you think about the expectations, everything, as I said, it'll be different. It's just right now it's tough because they were in such a good position and they struggled so much against good teams down the second half. I think they're like 6-20 or something versus playoff teams. Like, it's not good, but they still got a chance, and that's all you can ask for. And then, who knows what happens after that. So I guess we'll kind of see this weekend, but they do need, like, the bats need to come back. Like, they need Dahlbeck to kind of come back to hitting again because he's, as I said, he's got an ice cold. Like,
right.
They need this last series is going to have to be perfect. They, their margin for error is gone after this Orioles series.
Yeah, in a series where you really could have you needed 2 of 3. You could have used the sweep, and instead right now it looks like, I mean, we're in the bottom of the 8th. Orioles are up 6-2. They're going to need, I mean, who's coming up in the 9th?
Middle of the order. So Bogart's made the last out. So what is it, like Devers?
JD, Renfroe, Verdugo.
Yeah. No, Renfroe's hitting second.
Renfroe's hitting 6th. I'm looking at the lineup.
Oh, is it?
Hitting second.
Okay. You're right. Good call.
Yep. Damn right it is. Yeah, I mean, the other thing I wanted to talk about, this is kind of interesting. Bobby Dahlbeck taking ground balls at second base. To be very clear to those listening, this is not a Bobby Dahlbeck is a good fit at second base, let's try him there thing. This is we have the best, not best 9, best 8 non-catcher player lineup because you can't use Jose Iglesias in the playoffs.
Which is, who would have thought we would have said that's like a huge loss?
I know, right?
It's like that's
but
where we're at.
Your best 8 players are in some combination: Verdugo, Hernandez, Renfroe, Devers, Bogarts, Dahlbeck, Schwarber, JD Martinez.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is there isn't a second baseman in that group.
Well,
there is. That's wrong.
But there is, but you need him in center field.
There is, but he's also your best defensive outfielder.
Yeah,
either him or Renfroe, but you've got Renfroe, Penn, and right.
Yeah, like he's your best defensive outfielder. I mean, I think he should get some consideration for the Gold Glove. I don't think he will because he's played so much at second base.
Yeah,
but he's been that good defensively, and the problem is that you can't throw Verdugo out there, and obviously you can't throw Schwarber out there. You can't throw JD in center, so it's just like you're running into a situation where you have too many corner guys.
The reason you consider this is that there is a possibility that a lineup that has Bobby Dahlbeck at second, Kyle Schwarber at first, Alex Verdugo in left, and Kike Hernandez in center is a better defensive lineup than the one that has Dahlbeck at first, Schwarber in left, Verdugo in center, and Kike Hernandez at second.
Well, and I think the other reason you consider it is going into Washington, they're not going to have a DH.
Oh,
and so
gosh, that's right.
You're going to be taking 2 of those guys out of the lineup in every game. Like, I'm just not sure they want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have 2 Schwarber, Verdugo, JD, out of every game.
The thing is that during the regular season, during those 3 games, and by the way, in a tiebreaker, because a tiebreaker is a regular season game, you have Iglesias at second base.
Right.
So it's not like Iglesias is going to sit during the Washington series. He's also hitting.
But fair, but I'm just saying, like, if they did want to get all those guys in the lineup in Washington, like, that would be the way. that would be the way to do it too. I just muted myself back.
You did. I thought there was a glitch. Yeah, I mean, what's Iglesias tonight? 0 for 3. So coming back down to earth a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it's not a great situation they find themselves in. I mean, the fact that they're considering that, I think look, Christian Arroyo, I feel bad for the guy, but like he lost his spot getting hurt. Like they need to write out Jose Iglesias. I guess in theory you're going to have to start Arroyo at second sometimes, or at least he's going to be a defensive replacement. But like at this point, I mean, unless Dahlbeck, if Dahlbeck stinks the rest of the week, right? Like you are more likely to use Christian Arroyo at second in a potential playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with Dahlbeck, and we kind of talked about, I think last episode we talked about his like insane streak, is that he was going to struggle at some point. And that's like, this is just who the player he is. He's going to ebb and flow more than probably any player on their lineup, or like, and he's always been like this. He's extremely streaky, and his great streaks are going to be insane. Like obviously his last one was a prolonged streak that was extremely impressive, but his like valleys or craters are going to be absolute. Like he's just going to be unable to hit his way out of a paper bag. And like we talked about, during his hot streak, he cut the strikeouts down to, I think it was like 23% or something. He's struck out in 10 of his last 16 at bats. Like
right.
It's just, this is who he is. Like I know there was all those changes they talked about, but
with Schwarber, which led to a whole discussion on the forum of like, why didn't the hitting coaches get through to him? It's like, look, sometimes you just need a different voice. Like, well, exactly. Why does the AA hitting coach get through to you and not the like low A hitting coach? It's not because the AA hitting coach is better. Like,
but at the end of the day, with Dahlbeck, like this is kind of just who he is. He's always going to be streaky, and because he's prone to swing and miss. And if he can hit his way out of it, then obviously, you need to find a way to get him in the lineup. But if not, then I don't know if like there's that much. Like I'd almost rather have him just as a pinch hitter against lefties.
Or start him against lefties. I mean,
well, obviously, sorry, you'd start him against lefties, but I mean, against righties, he would come off the bench as a pinch hitter. The point was, you wouldn't have to be doing all these like gymnastics to get him in the lineup every day with the second base thing. But I guess the flip side is Arroyo's been really bad since he came back too. So it's like one of them is going to have to start at second base in the playoffs because you don't want to move Hernandez out of center field.
Right.
So
it's
just, I mean, and I think this just illustrates what we kind of talked about is like going into the season, this wasn't a team that was built to win the title. Like I know people don't want to hear that, but the financial constraints they were under, the way they operated, was not a team that was, chasing a title. If it was, they would have like addressed these positions. And the result is, you run into a situation where, you pick up Travis Shaw off of waivers. He's playing a decent amount. You have Christian Arroyo or Jose Iglesias off waivers as your starting second baseman, and him being absent is like a big deal. Like things like that are going to happen when you're kind of doing deals on the margins and not all in. And, if they can patch it together and get it in the playoffs, I think that would obviously be the preferred outcome. And then you never know once that happens. But for right now, they kind of find themselves in a weird position with regards to second base.
Yeah, I mean, but as far as built for the playoffs, because I was kind of talking with someone about this on Twitter, like this idea, like, look, once you get in, right, once/if they make it into the playoffs, like this idea that this team's not built for the playoffs. I mean, I don't know what that means, because like,
well, I think what it means to me is that we've seen what wins in October, and it's pitching and defense. And the Red Sox two biggest weaknesses right now, I would argue, are bullpen and defense.
Yeah.
Not in that order. Defense is first. And I think the defense definitely contributes to the struggles of the pitching staff. I think it's like
no question.
Eduardo Rodriguez has been just massacred by the defense this year. Like
his BABIP is 60 points higher.
Yeah, there was a stat comparing like his ground ball, like the number of ground balls that get through to him versus I think it was Robbie Ray or someone, and it was like an insane difference. And that's why his ERA is like 4.6, but he's like 10th
is much lower.
And he's also like 10th in the American League in WAR or something for pitchers.
Yeah, well, because there's which one is it? Fangraphs that uses FIP? Because BREF Baseball References WAR is for pitchers is very different than Fangraphs, because Baseball References, I think, is based off of like not ERA, but basically like runs allowed, and Fangraphs is based off of FIP. And so it's like less representative of like what actually happened.
Yeah, because if you look at Erod, and I think this is going to be a a fascinating discussion we'll get into in the offseason. You know, how much is he worth? He has like a career high strikeout rate, career low walk rate. Like his peripherals are great for him. Mm-hmm. It's just his ERA is really bad, and he's getting hit. You know, he's giving up a lot of hits.
Right.
And so, I just think that that's what I mean when I say they're not built for October. Is they don't have that pitching and defense that you see from teams that usually are successful.
But the weird thing isn't like their bullpen. The reason it doesn't look good right now is because Matt Barnes and Adam Ottavino both turned into pumpkins at the exact same time.
Which I don't think, and I think if you can fault them for anything, that was kind of predictable. Like when I was talking about it at the middle of the season, how they were both on pace for career highs in innings pitched, coming off of a year where they threw 20 innings. Like that's not good.
Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of pitchers who have thrown just as many innings as them that are still pitching fine.
Oh no, definitely there are. I'm just saying with Ottavino's case though, I know he's obviously had injuries in the past. And so I just think that, but I do agree that, and I think someone made that point to me was like, or someone said that on Twitter when I was talking about that was like, well, every pitcher is dealing with that. It's like, which is a completely fair thing. But I just think that with the Red Sox specifically, it was something that concerned me even going back to like the summer.
Sure. But then it's like, look, Hansel Robles has been pretty dang good lately. Garrett Richards in the bullpen has been a revelation. Like
before tonight, he gave up 2 runs tonight.
Oh, did he give up?
Yeah. But like, you know, Houck has been decent. And I do think, Whitlock getting hurt, Taylor getting hurt, like it's not ideal what has happened with the last like couple of weeks with those guys. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if they're going to be successful in the playoffs, they have like, I guess we should maybe talk about it if they get there, but like if they're starting pitching pitches well, there's no reason they shouldn't be in games.
That's like the thing. You're starting a rotation with Sale, Eovaldi. I have no problem with Eduardo Rodriguez as your number 3 starter.
No, and I have no problem with Pivetta as your number 4. Like you just have him as your 4, and if you pull him after 3 innings for Houck, that's fine. You know what I mean?
Or Whitlock, because you've got long guys in the bullpen. Because the playoff bullpen is what? Barnes, Ottavino, Robles, Richards. Whitlock, Houck. You need
Austin Davis has been very good.
Yeah, like if you look Davis,
at he's been great since they got him. Like if you
by the way, he hasn't pitched since like last Thursday.
Well, didn't he have like he was on the paternity list? I think.
No,
I believe
not for the past week. It was.
Oh, was it? Yeah. Oh, was it prior to that? Okay, sorry.
No, I mean that's fine. And then like Darwinzon, maybe Sawamura. Like I don't know how many they're gonna wind up with, but I the problem is you need Barnes and Ottavino to figure it the hell out.
Well, the problem is you don't have a closer, and I think that's what people focus on the most. Right. Is that they with Barnes struggles, except he hasn't been that bad since those 2 blow-up outings. Like it's just been not as good as it was in the first half. Mm-hmm. And the lack of the closer I think is the concerning thing.
Right.
But I think that's something kind of a bridge we'll cross if they get there, because this last series for Seattle is going to be tough. I mean, or not Seattle, excuse me. Against Washington is going to be tough. Like Washington has nothing to play for but be spoiler, and teams love being spoiler. I mean, we saw it with Baltimore this series. I saw it when I was down in Salem with Delmarva. Delmarva was celebrating like they won the World Series when they knocked Salem out of the playoffs. Like
if Juan Soto comes to the plate 12 times in this series,
I mean, he should be walked every single time.
I was going to say, do you think it's at least 10 walks, right?
I mean, it should be. Like, there's no reason for them to pitch to him with that lineup.
Right. It is what it is. We'll have to see. I don't know what else there is to say about the Major League Club right now, other than the fact that they're going into the 9th, down 4. Rafi Devers is up, so we'll see how that goes.
Well, and everyone will know the result by the time they listen to this.
True. So that's true. But they'll hear us in real time. Let's move to what's happening in the minors right now, because all that's happening is AAA and the DSL. Mm-hmm. The one thing I wanted to hit on in AAA is the resurgence a bit of Jeter Downs.
Yeah.
Downs has had a terrible season. Probably one of the, if we're calling a spade, at least statistically one of the worst seasons from a guy who came into the year as a top 100 prospect in this system that I can recall. Mm-hmm. He's just been really bad. But you have his last 10 games up, Ian, or I guess we could pull it off of my tweet.
I did, but I got rid of it. I can tell you right now. It's 294,
368, 559 in his last 10 games, and tonight he drove in another run.
And he had a couple hits tonight,
double.
I think.
Yeah, he had a double in the fourth. Nice to see at the end of what was a really hard year for him. And I think this is a good opportunity to talk about. We always say, look, prospect development isn't linear. I don't mind at all a prospect struggling at some point in the minors, even really struggling. Downs, Ian, struggled for longer than I would like. I'm not saying I want them to suck for a year, right? That's not what I want. I mean, and he's had a really bad year. I don't want it to be that bad, but some adversity is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because we get asked a lot, like, how is this guy still? It took us a while to move him out of the number 2 spot, I guess, because that was pre Marcelo Meyer, and we eventually bumped him down to 5 behind Casas, Meyer, York, and Duran, who, by the way, looks like Duran's not going to wind up graduating after all, probably.
Yeah.
This is why you don't just punt on a guy. Not this is why, but this is part of why you don't just punt on a guy for having a bad year. Do I wish he went out and raked? Yeah, of course, but you can learn things sometimes more from going out and struggling than you do from going out and just tearing the cover off the ball and not learning that some of the stuff you do isn't going to play at that level. And so that's why Hunter Renfroe just singled with 2 outs. Still doesn't look good, but we'll see. I have not given up hope on Jeter Downs. I don't think you have either, Ian. I guess it's what can we take away from this? To me, it's just good cap on a year. It was hopefully one that leads to better things to come for Downs, but I'm not punting on him yet.
Yeah, you can't write him off. I mean, this is, as scouts have constantly emphasized to me, this is a weird year. Like, you don't know what guys were doing the last year. You don't know how prepared they were for this season. Having seen Downs for, I don't know how many games, a good number of games this year, probably, 20, 30, 40 at bats. I think it just comes down to, at least what I saw from him is that I think it was a combination of a few things. It seemed a lot of it was mental. Baseball is a very mental game. There's a lot of confidence can really impact your ability at the plate, how you're just you can get in your own head. And that's to me what looked like with Downs was he was in his own head in the plate. And I don't know if it was the expectations of being, part of the Mookie Betts trade, wanting to make a good first impression or what, but, or if it was just, he just had high expectations for himself and he wasn't meeting them. Like
top prospect syndrome.
Exactly. He just was not doing the things that made him as good a prospect as he was back in the day. Or that he still is a good prospect.
I wouldn't say back in the day even. I mean, he's,
exactly right. But I do think the other thing is there were definitely some unrealistic expectations with him. He's not like a loud tools, no doubt, surefire, top 10 prospect, top 15, top 20 prospect
in the game.
In all of baseball. He was a solid prospect and the reason he was ranked where he was because he was a sum of all parts type player. And what I mean by that is he didn't have a standout tool, but it was 5 tools that you could all project in like the 45 to 50, maybe 55 range. And when you add that all together, you get a really solid, a good everyday player. But he was never he doesn't have that elite raw power or plus raw power like someone like Tristan Casas does. He doesn't have the, elite velocity like Brian Bale. He doesn't have that one standout tool. He was a bunch of, 45s, 50s, maybe a 55 here. And that I think that the expectations, I think there was just a little too much hype with him coming into the year. And obviously, if any prospect hit like he did, there were going to be questions. But I do think that there needed to be kind of we needed to pump the brakes a little bit with him. This is a guy who had 12 games, who had played 12 games above AA and was considered, a top. I think people kind of looked at him as like a top 20, top 30 prospect in baseball. And I just don't think he should have ever been ranked that highly based on the type of player he projected to be.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it was a lot of it was based on 2019 performance in the Cal League.
And he was great. He was great in 2019. Don't get me wrong.
For sure.
But yeah, like I think the biggest of the things that I've seen this year, the most concerning to me was the strikeout rate jump because you were
Yes.
talking about a guy who was like a 2017 to 20%, and I would assume like there was going to be a jump this year. Don't get me wrong, but I would have wanted like 25%, not
Hmm.
32, 33%, which is what he is.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest question for me is does the contact ability come back? Because that was one of the things that he was known for is it was a contact oriented swing and that's not what I saw from him this year. Too often this year, it was drop and drive, trying to hit home runs. It was kind of just trying to pull the ball. Like he needs to be hitting line. And something I kind of talked about in the last episode with Matthew Lugo. You need to stay within yourself as a player and not try to be someone you're not. Jeter now should not be a 30 plus home run hitter. He's not trying to emulate Tristan Casas, Bobby Dahlbeck, someone like that. He should just be hitting hard line drive style fields, and he'll naturally, because he's a good hitter, hit some home runs. He's got 14 home runs this year. But if he's trying to hit home runs, he's going to strike out a lot. And that's the thing I think he needs to just kind of reset, get the mental right at the plate, and hopefully we'll see a new player next year in spring training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. Yeah, get him in off season. You and I talked a little bit prior to recording about do you send him to Arizona? I don't think you do. I think you just let him get to the off season.
I don't think you do either, but I wouldn't.
I
wonder. I wonder if because of his solid end to the season they consider it. That's all.
Well, I think that at this point they have let the players know that they will be sending out there. And I think we might as well throw out.
I don't understand why it hasn't been announced yet. It's very weird.
It's very strange. I mean, we're 2 weeks out from the beginning of the Arizona Fall League. We have not heard who's going. I said on Twitter it looks like left-handed reliever Brendan Salucci might be going.
Yeah,
who was in Greenville, and that makes some sense.
That makes sense. The last thing I heard is I know that there's one player who knows he's going because they had to submit that name to MLB.
But that was a
while ago.
Week. Yeah,
no,
I mean at this point everyone must know.
But it was just weird that that it hasn't been publicly announced yet. So
it is. It's a little strange. Yeah. Anything else in AAA you want to mention, Ian, or just shall we do really quick DSL?
No, I mean Casas has looked fine. I think he's hitting. He's only hitting like 220. He's hitting like 250 or something, but he's hitting power. He's slugging out close to 500. His OBP's around 350. Like he's going to be a very good hitter. Mm-hmm. I think Hernandez worth a mention.
Has he caught?
I would like.
He's
I don't
caught,
know.
Right?
Can you look that up? I would really. If I was them, I would love to see him and Jay Groom could also get some work with their conditioning this offseason. Because if Hernandez can be a catcher, he's a very interesting bat. Because I know I don't love his swing, but he does have strong contact skills. He doesn't strike out very much at all. It's super aggressive, and that's part of the reason why he doesn't strike out. But we've seen that approach play at the major league level, and the bar for catcher is so low that if he can hit, I mean, he's hitting since his promotion 454, 500, 556. If he can even be, like a 260 hitter in the major league level, if he can just get to fringy defense, that's an everyday catcher. And so the bar is so low for him that
he's caught 4 times, so he's definitely caught.
Yeah.
So he's got hits in all 5 games he's played in AAA.
It's good to see the end of the season with him because he was obviously struggled so much for that first half of the season. So, and he's someone that if he wasn't on the 40 man, I would love to see in the fall league, but unfortunately he probably can't go because of that. But okay, this is conspiracy theory time, safe space. We can talk about this.
Sure.
I wonder if they're negotiating prospects on the 40 man being able to go to the fall league, and that's why they haven't been announced yet.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know.
Just a theory. This is no inside info.
Yeah,
this is just because I know teams would love for that to happen, but I could see the Union being like non-starter.
Yeah, I can't see that happening because if they didn't let that happen last year, when guys literally hadn't played.
Good point. Didn't think about that. Yeah, you're right. We can just edit that part out.
No, it's an interesting thought. We'll see. It's an interesting, crazy idea. Down in the DSL, honestly, the most interesting stuff there's 2 things. One, Miguel Blaze, who's our 17th ranked prospect, got hurt in last Thursday's game. Had not played, missed 4 games in a row. He got back in the lineup today. So that was good to see. Good to see that it's just a minor kind of, nick, not a major injury or anything like that. The other very interesting thing, and I have to find the list, is that as we reported on here and on Twitter, the Fall Instructional League is not going to happen in the way that we typically understand it. I should probably just go to the staff forum. The way it's probably going to work is they're going to split the guys in two, have them come in separately, not play games against other teams. Based on social media posts, at least, as well as the fact that these guys haven't played in the DSL this week, it seems like a number of DSL players are coming up for fall instructs, which is kind of interesting. And those players are outfielder Juan Chacon, outfielder Jostinson Garcia, catcher Enderso Lira. I think that's all the position players. And then pitchers Jetixon Paez, Francis Hernandez, Jose Ramirez, Yordani Monegro, Luis Perales, and Cesar Ruiz. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 arms, one of whom was hurt for almost the entire DSL season.
Perales hasn't pitched since like the first week of the season.
So he might be coming up, honestly, for rehab at this point. But those guys are all in the U.S., and I was wondering why they came up so early, because they're basically missing the last week of the DSL. And I think, Ian, it might, and this is complete guesswork on my part, my guess is there's some kind of quarantine period they have to deal with.
Could be, I don't know.
Coming from the Dominican, not because it would not. It's obviously not a U.S. thing, but I think it's probably more of like a minor league protocols type thing. And they probably figure it's because even if they're going to split the guys in two, they do eventually run a Dominican instructs. So the thought is probably get these guys up for the first round of U.S. fall camp or whatever they're calling it, then get them back to the Dominican for Dominican instructs.
Makes sense timing wise.
So that's my guess.
Because like you look at some. Have you seen Enderso Lira's September stat line?
No, is it basically just a bunch of walks?
Well, he's hitting 297, 500, 405.
Right.
13 walks, 5 strikeouts.
Exactly what we were told would happen with him, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he might be the poster person for do not read too much into the DSL stats, because he's hitting, 220 there?
Yeah.
And he's clearly the second best prospect on that team behind Miguel Blaze. And on his team. From what we've been told, he's the second best prospect for the Red Sox down there from the hitters. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he's got 32 walks, 18 strikeouts this year. And it's just, he basically just is like, I'm bored, I'm going to swing now because I have to. I can't walk every single time I'm up.
Yeah, so. And I mean, Chacon and Garcia on the other team, on the red team, were a pretty good 1-2 punch in center and right field. They're basically alternating between center and right all season long.
Yeah, Chacon's been really good in September. He's 356, 441, 475. Again, not that stats mean much down there, but it's good to see him. And I do think that it's nice that those guys got that extra couple of weeks. And I think what they had on Sunday too, I'm guessing.
You guess what?
I'm guessing that their season ends on Sunday also.
Saturday. They don't play on Sundays. But Saturday's their last game. They're the inter-squad, the weekly inter-squad game.
So yeah, I mean, it's been good that those guys have gotten more bats, and it'll be interesting to see if what we can hear based on instructs about how those guys look, even if they're not playing games, more in like a simulated scrimmage environment.
If they even do that, I mean, if they're splitting the guys in two, I wonder if they'll even do that, honestly. But
yeah, it could just be all individual work. I think it's still being finalized, other than the splitting up part.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they know what they're doing at this point, but it just hasn't been released publicly. If they've got guys in Fort Myers already.
Right.
But at any rate, that's the news from the DSL. I think that's about it. The other thing we wanted to mention, Ian, Baseball America started releasing its league prospect lists, which this year, honestly, I would say take with an enormous grain of salt, given the fact that teams weren't playing outside of their division. In a 2-division league, half of they talked to managers and roving coordinators for teams when they make these lists, and like the coaches and coordinators for a given team aren't seeing at least half, if not 2/3 of the league, depending on how many divisions there are. So big grain of salt. But for the Florida Complex League list, the top prospect was Marcelo Meyer, and the 5th ranked prospect was third baseman / first baseman Blaze Jordan. And then the list for the Low A East, Nick York was the number 2 prospect in that league. Nothing really surprising on either list. I was maybe Jordan being 5th on the FCL list was maybe not surprising, but like the least predictable might be the way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, Meyer, the reports we've been getting from the down there have been very impressive. Yep. And obviously I've seen York this year for a week, and the reports were, other than the first, after the first 6 weeks, were incredible. And I mean, Gunnar Henderson actually, I think, is similarly kind of a weirdly similar profile to York in that it's a bat first guy, questions about his defense, but like Gunnar Henderson could absolutely rake. And I don't think there's any, Nick York being behind him on that list isn't like a knock on York. Gunnar Henderson's a very good prospect also.
Gunnar Henderson, of course, a shortstop prospect in the Orioles organization.
He's not a shortstop, but yeah.
I mean, playing shortstop now. Fair.
Yeah.
I mean, and look, the other thing to keep in mind too is these lists have a tendency to be very wonky anyway. You'll just see weird, like, I remember like one of the lists came out, either the low A list, like either the South Atlantic League list or the Gulf Coast League list came out one year, and it was like completely contrary to how we had a couple guys ranked, and they're like, oh man, that's crazy. And it's like, yeah, because these managers like see guys randomly, like they're not asking scouts that sit on the league necessarily with the way they do the league lists. So at least I don't think they ask scouts. I think it's all team personnel.
Yeah, it seemed the only people that, I mean, obviously you're not going to, they didn't do any like according to an AL scout or whatever. It was all, right. This manager said this or this instructor said this. So.
Yeah, I think they explicitly say they just talk to managers and roving.
And obviously, as long as you make that clear, like that's a perfectly fine way to do it. I thought the Jordan write-up was the most interesting, the part where they said that they were hearing that he has a chance to stick in third. I don't. We'll wait and see on that. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to see him this year because he wasn't playing when I was in Salem. But I mean, I think it makes sense where they had those guys, and it will be interesting to see where they have anyone else as kind of they move through the higher levels.
Yeah, I guess you want to throw some predictions on it. I would say high A East.
Well, this is the thing is weird. Like, if York is considered for the list, I think he'll be on it, but I don't know if he will be.
I don't know if he will be.
Because I know in the past they've had guys on multiple leagues lists.
Yeah.
So
I could see Groom on the high A East list. I don't think Bayo was there long enough.
Bayo will be on the double A list.
He'll probably be on the double A list. Casas will be on the double A list.
Yeah, Casas should be. I mean, I guess that league was kind of good this year, though. I was going to say he should be first.
I mean, Casas will be on there. I mean, he may not be first because, like Somerset, for example, was.
Well, no, but Torque was there too.
Wasn't Rushman was there too?
Yeah, Rutschman was there. So
that's not going to happen.
But I think those are the guys.
AAA list. Duran will probably be on. I bet.
Yeah, maybe that's about it.
They might have guys on every list.
Well, in the past, they've done 20 names, too. This year, they're only doing 10, so there's not as much. It doesn't get as in-depth as it used to.
Good point. Yeah. Want to get to emails, Ian? I don't think there's anything else we've got to go over. Let's head over to emails again. It's podcast@soxprospects.com if you want to send us your questions by email. Our first was one that we got last week. This is from... our friend Angelo, and he says, "Hi guys, love the podcast and the site. I'll be quick. Minor League, he says MILB, but it's Major League Baseball, was testing several rule changes this year. Any feedback yet on how they worked out?" And we punted on this question last week because we just didn't have data on it off the top of our heads. Luckily, and kind of conveniently, Baseball America published today an article about just this, and they put out a podcast. We're not going to go as far into it. Check out Baseball America's podcast. JJ Cooper and Kyle Glazer, who wrote the article, kind of go a little bit in depth on this. We'll just hit on them quickly. But some of the rules changes that they tested in the minor leagues and how they turned out. The 15-second timer was introduced in. So first is a pitch clock. It was introduced in the Low A West on June 8th, 5 weeks into the season. And apparently it led to a decrease of 21 minutes in the average gate time of a 9-inning game.
So it wasn't at every Low A level?
Low A West.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, when I was at Salem, they didn't have the pitch clock.
No.
Yeah.
Just the Low A West.
Yeah, I do like the strict pitch clock, though. I will say that's of the rule ones, these ones, that's the one I'm most
And to be clear, it is a strict enforcement of a pitch clock as opposed to what they have in the high minors.
Which is I've never seen it enforced once.
It's as long as you're not screwing around on the mound.
Yeah.
You don't get anything called on you. And if you step off, it resets the pitch clock.
Yeah, I've seen the clock expire too, and they've done nothing.
So this is like a strict enforcement of the pitch clock. And it also led to increases in batting average, runs and home runs, and a decrease in walks and strikeouts.
Which makes sense because if you think about it, the reason it takes so long between pitches is because pitchers exert so much effort with each pitch, and they just need that rest time, and they can take more time with no pitch clock in between pitches, allowing them to recover for the next one. But with this stricter interpretation, you can't be pitching for a strikeout every single pitch, or you're just going to be gassed by the third inning. So
batting average.
You have to be better. You have to, pitch more to contact. You have to throw, take a little bit off, like things like that happen.
Batting average increased from without to with was without the pitch clock. It was 237. With the pitch clock, it was 263. Obviously, you can have some randomness in there, but like it's kind of like that across the board. And apparently, like no one hated it. Everyone universally kind of likes it. Players, managers, spectators, obviously. I mean that's a good thing. So that's an interesting change. They're going to use the 15-second pitch clock in the Arizona Fall League. They're actually going to use like all of these in the Arizona Fall League, which is going to be interesting. But I could see that coming to the major leagues within the next, maybe not next year, but soon. In AAA, they tried larger bases, going from 15 to 18 square inches. The goals being to increase the success rate on steals, increase the number of infield hits, and decrease the number of collisions around the bag. And success rates went up from about 69 to 72%. To this year, they were about 76% in AAA. So that's interesting that happened. They don't have any data here on collisions or on close plays at the bag, infield hits, but that certainly seems like it's working to some degree. And the other thing is apparently just no one noticed. Like it wasn't a big deal. Like no one really, it seems like it was a successful rules change along with the pitch clock. AA, this one's interesting, Ian, is the shift restrictions. They tried a pair of rules at AA. In the first half, all 4 infielders had to be on the dirt when the pitch was delivered. In the second half, they had to be on the dirt, and 2 infielders had to be on each side of second base in addition to being in the dirt. The thought was that, by limiting shifts, more balls in play would get through the infield. But in fact, there was no change on batting average on balls in play, and hits per game did not increase or decrease appreciably. So it didn't really seem to matter. And anecdotally, in this article by Kyle Glazer, it seems like that while a lot of balls that would have been outs with the shift became hits, and other balls that would have been hits against the shift turned into outs with infielders playing straight up.
Well, and I think that's the big thing is like,
yeah,
the guys, I think too, especially in the minor leagues, the guys aren't good enough hitters to be hitting, through the shift. So the result is when you have guys in their normal position, it's just going to even out.
Exactly.
Whereas I think I honestly would be more interested in seeing what they would do when they did it, if they did that at the major league level, to see a difference. Because I feel like major league hitters are obviously much better bat control. Like they could do a better job, I think, of.
I think they try this in AAA because I think they're going to need more data to decide either way. And I think look, I'm on team. Let teams do what they want, but they're going to try this in the AFL. I think.
Or sorry, I'm fine with people shifting. I don't like
strategy, man.
Or whatever.
It's strategy.
It's also, to me, it's if you have a left-handed hitter who's good enough that he can hit the other way, and you're not playing a guy at third base, that's your fault. Like you're making the conscious decision to not to stop him from hitting the ball hard. And if he's willing to take a single, then he should be rewarded for that. That's good baseball right there.
Well, and I think with the reasoning, the argument against the shift is you're taking away. Like, no one goes to the ballpark to see David Ortiz line out to a second baseman playing short field and right, is the argument. I'm not saying I agree with that, but that's the argument, right? And so they're not there to see David Ortiz flick a single the other way. Mm-hmm. That said, show me the numbers that show that's what's happening.
I think the time the game takes is a way bigger issue to the casual fan than what you just described.
Well, the time the game takes and the action during that time, which I think those need to be considered together.
But those go hand in hand with the pitch clock, as you discussed earlier.
Exactly, and they also go hand in hand with, in high A, they tested the step-off move. The step-off rule where to attempt a pickoff throw, the pitcher had to fully step off the rubber. the MLB apparently experimented with this in the Atlantic League. Not apparently, they experimented with this in the Atlantic League in 2019. They were going to do it last year, but that was obviously canceled. I guess it did lead to an increase in the number of stolen base attempts and stolen base success rates. But that said, there were concerns about it almost becoming too easy. Stolen base success rates in high A had been between 67 and 69% for 5 years. This year, success rates were 75.8%. Attempts per game went up about a half an attempt per game, maybe a little less. That said, there were concerns about whether it made stealing too easy, and there were also concerns about pitchers would get promoted from high A to double A and forget how to do a pickoff. Like left-handers would forget their pickoff move because they just literally weren't using it. So I think this one doesn't go forward, but we'll see. Similarly, in low A, they tested a rule with pickoff limits where pitchers could attempt to throw over twice. If they attempted a third pickoff and didn't record an out, it resulted in a balk. So in other words, the base runner would be awarded, in theory, second. Teams averaged more stolen base attempts per game. It was up by more than half an attempt per game, and the success rate went up 9%, from 68% to 77%. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Pitchers had a better tempo, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand with a pitch clock of you don't want Clay Buchholz going in and throwing over to first base 6 times, right? So I think I feel better about that move than the step-off rule, Ian. I don't know where you kind of stand on these two.
I agree. And I'll be honest, that was in low A East, right?
No, that was low A generally.
Yeah, so I didn't notice it once. We never ran into a situation when I was in Salem that the runner had to be picked off or if it was a steal.
I don't recall it happening the couple of games I went to in Fredericksburg.
And I think that the step off one is just tough because that's like a legitimate change to the way baseball has been played. Like the number of times you have a pitcher not named Clay Buchholz throw over to first base more than like 2 times and it's one batter, right? Like it rarely happens in a normal game. And so I just don't think that's like a noticeable change, but it does, rein in those few guys who are, do that.
The human rain delay. Yeah.
Whereas the step off one is like a massive change to how the game is played. One of the things I remember from growing up was Andy Pettit had like the nasty pickoff. Yep. We always used to go out in the backyard and act like we were trying to, emulate it to when we were playing like, wiffle ball in the backyard, things like that. Like that's changing the way if you have to step off. And I don't like, I don't think that's a necessary change that needs to be made. If I don't think the base runner needs that big of an advantage. Let's just say.
I think that's right. I mean, I don't like the step off. I'm cool with limiting the number of times you throw over. It adds some strategy to when you throw over.
Exactly.
As well. It adds tension.
I would guarantee you we would only ever see that happen, once a series, maybe. Like I was there for 5 games or 6 games and I didn't see it a single time. And I don't even remember getting to 2 throws. Like I don't remember there ever being a situation where they had to pick them off.
Right.
So yeah.
And more stolen bases is a good thing in my mind. The last one.
Just quickly on the stolen bases things. And I do think part of the problem with stolen bases is not to do with these rules. I think part of the problem is the way the game has evolved. Analytics say stolen bases are like not the greatest decision.
Well,
and that's why teams aren't running as much.
The idea is teams will run more if they're more likely to have success doing so. Because they were talking about this on BA's podcast.
Okay, interesting. I guess so, yeah.
Where, stolen base attempts were up, as was success rate, right? And that's because you're running more because maybe you can get a bigger jump and it's more likely to be successful. In MLB, stolen base attempts are down, but success rate, I think, might have gone up because teams are only running when they're going to have a better chance of success because they kind of realized, I remember reading this in Baseball Between the Numbers, one of the early baseball prospectus books, the break-even rate is about 75% to make it worth running, right? Where you're actually contributing positively by stealing bases is having a 75% success rate. And it was talking about how like a number of these guys who were considered like really fast, they steal all these bases. Like there were guys who would steal a bunch of bases but get thrown out a third of the time and they were actually costing their team runs. And they just didn't realize that in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s. And they started to realize that with when teams started turning to analytics. You want to make it more likely of success. Higher likelihood of success means teams try it more because it's more likely to add value. The last rule change that was tried in the minors, the affiliated minors in the low A Southeast, was the automated ball strike system. And basically, I won't get too far into it because I feel like I'm pilfering enough from this article as it is. But essentially, the robo-umps are not ready for prime time yet. It was the Hawkeye tracking system, and the home plate umpire had an earpiece. And I guess it was so bad. And keep in mind, this is low A, that they actually adjusted the strike zone in July. They eliminated space from the top of the strike zone. They took 3.5 inches off the top, widened it by 2 inches on each side of the plate, and changed that the pitches were registered from the middle of the plate instead of the front, which correlated with slight increases in batting average and slugging and a reduction in walks and strikeouts. But that said, it's definitely not ready for prime time yet. The technology is good, but it's going to need a lot of tweaking. Robo-umps are not going to come to MLB. I don't think in this CBA. I think it's probably going to be the next CBA at that point because they're still trying to work out the optimal zone. I think part of the problem is they tried to enforce the rule book strike zone and realized that low A pitchers can't work with that.
And didn't it also extend the game time? It didn't shorten it, which was obviously the goal of it.
Right. It doesn't talk about that in the article, but I believe that's the case.
I remember reading an article. I think it was
in the podcast they talked about that.
Yeah. And I think for me, when I think about the robot umpires, is at the end of the day, you still are going to have a guy back there to either do the call the balls of strikes or to call plays at the plate. What's the point? I get why people want it. They want consistencies with the umpire, but I think maybe the better way is maybe you have a stricter guideline or grading system for umpires or something, because for the most part, these guys are getting 90+% of strikes right. It's not. I don't think it's a massive issue, honestly, but yeah. I don't think it's as big of a deal as people think it is. I mean, heck, go watch some highlights of the 90s Atlanta Braves and just the strike zones those guys were getting. I mean, Greg Maddux was getting 3 inches off the outside of the plate, 4 inches off the outside of the plate every time he pitched. Not that that's why he was good. He was pitching to the strike zone he was getting, but some of the strike zone that's called now is a lot better than it used to be, man. If you look at some of these, it's just that now we have instant replay and Twitter and HD. That makes it a lot easier. The other thing they mentioned, not in the article, but on the podcast that I wanted to mention, is one that got a lot of people up in arms was in the Atlantic League moving the mound back. Apparently made no difference at all in offense at all. Completely not noticeable. No difference in injury rates or anything like that. So I don't think you're going to see that in the affiliated minors either. Just because it didn't do anything. This just in, hitting is hard. So yeah, I don't think that's something we see move forward, but we'll see. So, but yeah, anyway, that was a listener question. So thanks for the question, Angelo. Our next question comes from our Patreon supporter, Aaron. He says, hi, guys. On the last show, now 2 shows ago, you mentioned the idea of moving Jaren Duran back to second base, and it made me wonder when the last time a prospect was moved from the outfield to the infield, excluding a guy who can't handle the outfield, so we move him to first base. Has that ever happened that you can recall? What are the reasons you would see for moving someone from the outfield to the infield? Most players who are legit prospects in high school played shortstop because that's the star position. So for this situation to arise, it would likely be someone who played in the infield before, but was moved to the outfield for some reason, which makes a switch back seem even less likely. Thanks, Aaron. And it's kind of funny, Ian, reading this, I'm reminded of Matt Tice, I forget how you pronounce it, for the Angels, who the Angels just announced is moving to catcher, which is the position he played in high school and college, that the Red Sox drafted him at, not a high school. Oh, yeah, because then he went to UVA, right?
He went to UVA, yep. Yeah. And he got drafted and immediately basically moved to first base.
I mean, look at even with the Red Sox system right now, they're doing the Steven Scott to some extent is having this transition. He was an outfielder for the most part.
He played a bunch of different stuff at Vanderbilt.
Right, but in his first season, he was an outfielder.
Right, and he's playing mostly first and outfield.
Now he's playing first and catcher now also.
He's playing some outfield too.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the season's over, but yeah,
played
he
all
did
three.
play some outfield.
Yep.
He can hit though, so yeah.
Yeah,
But anyway,
exactly.
yeah, I was trying to think of like a big name example of it, and I couldn't think of one because it's
Jahmai Jones, or did he go the
Jahmai
other?
Jones is probably no. That's good. The
Yeah.
Orioles, I think, moved him back.
No. Oh,
But it's
did they move him back to the outfield? Because the Angels had
no,
moved him from the outfield to second.
I think the Orioles moved him back. Are keeping. Sorry, the Orioles are keeping him at second. Let me look.
Okay, because I remember the Angels moved him from the outfield to
Yeah,
second.
they're keeping him at second. So
Okay.
I just think that for the most part, you rarely are going to see a situation where if a guy started in the infield and then moved to the outfield, you don't usually move them back because there's a reason you're moving them off the infield. Like,
Right.
You know, it's a different story with like utility guys, like someone like, you know, Kike Hernandez plays like infield and outfield, but that's the role he is. Or like Sedan Rafael is another one. Like we talked about it on the Patreon game updates and last week, Fitzgerald. Like certain guys are being groomed to that. But if you're a potential everyday player, usually they're going to stick you in one position
And try and keep you as long as they can at the higher value defensive position, which is why like when Jeter Downs was acquired, we heard second base, and they've been playing him at short, and now it looks like he might be a shortstop.
Yeah, he was decent at short. I think though with Duran, the interesting thing is that if he's not a center fielder, second base is higher on the defensive spectrum than corner outfield though. So that's I understand where the emailer is coming from.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But I just think that with him, they put so much into making the outfield, and I do understand the speed aspect of it. That yeah, I think
the ceiling is higher for him in the outfield if he can figure it out. But that said, if he can't, he can't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But the question is, you know, when was the last time he took ground balls to second base?
Right. And I think it comes down to the fact that like it takes a very specific situation for that to happen. Like a guy like Jones, you probably need a high baseball IQ guy.
Well, Duran wasn't a great second baseman. He was like an average second baseman when I saw him in his first season. And I think the Red Sox, especially with what you've seen this year, infield defense, they clearly have undervalued. And they're not going to want to put someone at second base.
I don't know that I agree, but
what?
That they undervalued infield defense?
Okay, maybe they were just stuck with what they had.
Right. I mean, you had Bogarts and Devers. It's not like you were going to enter the season saying we need to move them.
You had Bogarts, Devers, Dahlbeck. Yeah, I guess you were kind of stuck with that. But
yeah.
But like I'm not sure that they're going to be wanting to put like someone at second base, you know, next season who is who's been played outfield for the last 3 seasons. I don't think they would be comfortable with that, given they clearly recognize they need to upgrade their defense in the infield.
All right. Yeah. No, I'm with you. Our next email comes from emailer. Let me get it. Etan. I think it's Etan. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. He'd sent a very long initial email, and I said, great email, but like, gonna have to shorten it for me to read it. So he has a bunch of questions. First one, he says, is it possible that we are vastly underrating Jaren Duran? He's 25, and his hitting record is much thinner than I think people realize. There were 117 excellent games in low A, or in short season low A, high A. Followed by 82 below average games in Double A in 2019. This year's explosion at Triple A was only 52 games, and he's been redshirted in 33 games at the major league level. Overall, his Steamer ROS weighted runs created plus is 90, which is below guys like Tyreek Reed, Pedro Castellanos, he lists others, and many others who don't even sniff at the top 20 prospects. And Duran's speed hasn't translated to good center field defense or many steals. To me, he either needs a big leap as a hitter next year or he will be a potential DFA. Strong disagree with potential DFA. I think overrated in the sense that, and we've talked about this, he's not a top 30 prospect in the game. Is he a back-end top 100 prospect? I think so.
Yeah, but I don't think also that's us being revisionist history. Like, I feel like we've been pretty consistent in saying that since.
I don't think he's necessarily saying we are overrating him, by the way.
No, I'm saying that I'm just saying for our like process though, I think it's important to note that like that's something that we never saw him as that good of a prospect. You know, that was something obviously that other people were doing, but I was never comfortable with him at that level.
Yep. He says, can't we declare Bobby Dahlbeck a major success story at this point? Between 2020 to 21, he ranks third in WRC plus on the Red Sox, behind only Xander Bogaerts and Rafael Devers, and ahead of JD Martinez, Hunter Renfroe, Alex Verdugo, and Kike Hernandez. I know the first base defense doesn't rate well, but he was supposed to be a plus defender at third, and he has the length and skills to be a good first baseman. I think we're seeing why we can't yet in the past week.
Well, no, and this is the thing. He's going to be streaky. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't as good. We talked about in the last episode. He wasn't as bad as he was during the year. He's not as good as he was during this stretch.
Yep.
And with the plus defense thing, I think we've mentioned on here before, he was a plus defender in the low minors. He was not that by the time he got to the high minors. He was average at third base.
Yeah.
Like, he was not as good a defender as people thought by the time he graduated as a prospect at third
He
base.
never was a plus defender. He was, when I saw him in Salem, then the high A affiliate, he was
fine.
an above average defender with the chance to be plus.
And he had
right?
who happened to have like a 70 arm.
Easy 70 arm.
Yeah, and now he's a below. I mean, I don't know how Fangraphs calculates their D WAR, but he's negative 12.5 on their D WAR, and so that's really bad. So like he's been very bad at first base. He's been better of late, but yeah, I mean he was not, like, by the time he graduated, or when he was in Double A, he was not seen as a plus defender at third base.
Right. He next asks, are we still underrating Nick York? His age 19 season hitting is the best in recent Red Sox history, better than Bogarts, Devers, Costas, and any others I can think of. Seems like he has a chance to be an elite hitter and crack the top 10 overall prospects once people really digest what he has done this year. I think that's heavy.
So I think we talked about in the last episode. Yeah. I think he's a top 50 guy nationally.
Yeah,
but
easy.
The problem with him is that his value is all driven by his bat, and those lists aren't fantasy lists. They're they're going to take defense into account, and I don't think he'll ever have the defensive ability to crack a top 10, because in order to do that, you need to be unless
all
you're
facets.
Like 70 offensive player, like 70 hit, 70 power, or 70 hit, 50 power guy. You need to be at least an above average defender probably to crack the top 10, because you're looking at the top 10 list is going to be guys like Bobby Witt, who can play shortstop and center field, Adley Rutschman, who's a plus defender at catcher, Marco Luciano, who is kind of that unique hitting guy, and he can be a plus defender at third. Like, everyone, for the most part, all those guys are going to add value defensively, and it's why kind of with someone like Tristan Costas, you very rarely see first baseman crack the top 10 like Torkelson has, which I'm not sure I agree with that.
Well, I think he's fallen out of it in a lot of places now.
Okay, fair. But guy Andrew Vaughn, I'm not sure, was he ever a top 10 prospect?
I don't know if he was top 10. He was top 25.
But yeah, it's hard. York will have a tough time cracking that because of his defense.
I agree. And it's look, I as far as the age thing, I hate to use that because college guys enter the system at 22. Well, at 21. So half the guys you're drafting enter the system that late. And then you've got international guys who are their own thing.
I also think that after the minor league changes, you're going to have to adjust how we look at age, because the leagues are just getting younger. Like, with no lull, guys are going to be getting pushed more aggressive. You're going to have younger players playing in low A. You're going to have, which means you're going to have younger guys in high A, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
So, and just as a aside, like, Torkelson's fourth on Fangraphs list, and they have him as a 60 hit, 70 power. Like, that's the kind of level you have to be a top 10 guy as a hitter-only prospect.
Right. His last question is it possible that Jeter Downs' down year was largely bad luck? Among AA and AAA players, his batting average on balls in play was 308th out of 312. He was very young for AAA, and he hit 14 homers in 94 games, along with 17 steals and 20 attempts. Would you be surprised to see a big bounce back next year? We talked about this a little bit. Minor league average on balls in play for hitters, I don't love, only because you see a lot of variability in quality of contact in the minors, as well as how speed factors into defense's ability to record outs. So, for example, like a player like Gilberto Jimenez is going to have a very high average on balls in play, because even a AA defense is probably not going to be able to throw him out.
No.
A ball to the left side, he's basically on base unless he smoked it. So, I mean, I don't know that it's largely luck because of the strikeout rate. I mean, the strikeout rate is the strikeout rate, but
the things I would be more interested in and that I think would give a better idea of a down season is like the advanced stuff, like the O swing, his exit velos, things like that obviously aren't publicly available. Yeah, like those are the things that I think would give a better example, because like if his exit velos are like good, and like his swing rate his swing and miss is like not as high as his strikeout rate, things like that, then maybe it's bad luck. But without knowing those, I think it's hard to say just based off BABIP alone.
Right. Thanks for the email. Our next email comes from Patreon supporter Al Mendel, and he says, Ian and Chris, do you think that the Red Sox should extend a qualifying offer to Eduardo Rodriguez? He might be able to command a contract similar to what Nathan Eovaldi was given 3 years ago at 4 years, $68 million. So the QO might be a slight overpay, but with only a 1 year commitment. If the Red Sox do make the qualifying offer, do you think Erod should accept it? Thank you, Al Mendel. It's an interesting question, Ian. I have no idea what to make of Eduardo Rodriguez.
I would 100% give him the qualifying offer.
I would too.
Because if you can get him on a 1 year deal, I don't care if it's what it would be, like 18.5 or something.
Well, it's probably going to be higher because it goes up every year.
Even if it's 20.
Well, I guess it didn't go up this past year; it went down. But
yeah, but whatever it is, if it's 18, 20 million, I'd be perfectly fine with that for him for one season, unless if you can't extend him. And that's what I was talking about this with someone recently about, like, what does an Erod extension look like? Like, I threw out like 460. Yeah. And they were like, oh, I think that might be low. Like, I could see like 590. Like, I have no idea what his market's going to look like. And I think the big, like, the elephant in the room is I don't think anyone knows what the market's going to look like because we have no idea what the CBA is going to look like.
No, it's going to be an incredibly slow offseason because there's no point in signing a free agent before you know what the CBA is going to look like.
But I believe they're going to have to offer him. They're going to have to offer him the QO before they know the new CBA.
Yeah,
and so I think that's a no-brainer, though. I think because if you can't let him walk for nothing, like, and if he was at the open market, what's the lowest he gets? 12 million a year. Probably. Like, he's like 10th in the AL and WAR.
I think he might get 15.
No, I'm saying the lowest is like 12.
Right, but I'm saying as a floor, the floor might be 15.
I think it could be too. Like, I just don't see why you wouldn't. Worst case, you get him 1 year. Like, even if it's 10 million, like I'd rather if the options are he wants a 4 year 40 million, you can have him 1 year 18 or 1 year 16. I'll give him the 1 year deal.
Sure.
Like, and I honestly, it's hard to say if he'll accept it or not, But I wouldn't be like, if you're him, is it the worst idea to accept it and then go test your market again? No, but I just think there are going to be teams interested. Like, teams aren't going to care about his ERA, honestly. They're going to look at the K rate, career high. They're going to look at the walk rate, career low. They're going to think he got unlucky. They're going to think, oh, we have an elite second baseman and shortstop. If we have that with this type of pitcher, we can get him back to like a 3.5 ERA guy. Like, he's a very serviceable number 3 starter. And I think that's how he's going to be valued.
Yeah, I think that's right. Here's an interesting QO question for you that's not from the email. First of all, JD Martinez, do you opt out? Second of all, if you're the Red Sox and JD Martinez opts out, do you offer him the QO?
I think you do, yeah. Because worst case, you get him back at what, more or less the same number as this opt-out? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. Yeah,
I am inclined to agree, but here's the interesting thing. If you're JD Martinez, do you opt out knowing that the Red Sox will extend you a qualifying offer?
Did he not get the qualifying offer when he was a free agent after, what was it, when he got that long-term deal with, no, because the Red Sox didn't have to give up a pick because he was traded from Detroit to Arizona.
Yes.
So no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so he's never gotten it. Yeah, so I guess they could offer it to him. Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I don't know what he's going to do because I feel like if you're him and the universal DH happens, you're going to want to test the market because there's going to be 15 new teams that can look at you.
But wouldn't you also want to test the market without the QO? Because here's the thing. If they're going to get the universal DH in 2022, when are they going to know that for sure? Right?
Not until the spring, late. Probably.
So they really aren't going to be able to act on it until the following year.
Yeah, fair.
That's the year he's got to be targeting.
Well, no, not necessarily though, because
if he waits that late, I guess that's true.
Yeah, because if he opts out and they offer him the QO, and there's no deal, it's going to freeze on December 1st, and like by the time it's finished negotiating, nothing can happen in that time. So it's not like he could sign elsewhere in that time. So he'll still be a free agent.
But
he's locked in that position.
But he's got to make the decision on the qualifying offer well before then, obviously.
Right, but I'm saying that, yeah, exactly. He's going to have to act before that point.
So I just think it's interesting. Like, even if he wants to stay for one more year, it behooves him to opt out, get the QO, and accept it. Because then he hits free agency the following year without the QO.
Well, he can't be offered it the following year.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Get your QO. It's like basically what's happening with Gossman and Stroman this year, where they accepted the QO, played their 1 year, and now they're going to hit free agency. And like, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
They're going to get paid probably.
They're going to get paid because it's like if you're the Red Sox, like even with like the down second half that Gossman had, he's an attractive target. You don't have to give up a pick to get him. Right?
Yeah,
As
same with
especially Scherzer.
Especially if you're looking. Well, no, Scherzer can't get it either. He's traded midseason.
Oh, I guess that's true. Okay, Scherzer's a bad example. Good point. Like a Verlander maybe or a Kershaw who are also old.
But I think though that I think the better way to look at it is if you're going after one of those pitchers, and I think there was a good article by Peter Gammons discussing the Red Sox plans where he said more along the lines of, it's not clear if the Red Sox are willing to outlay more than $200 million on a player this offseason, which I think is, to be fair, like, yeah, I mean, no one knows what the market is going to look like financially in the next CBA. I think a lot of teams are going to be hesitant to do that until there's some clarity in that situation.
Sure.
But I think it would be a nice balancing act where you have an extra pick, you sign one of the big pitchers, who doesn't require a pick, and then you can go after Semien, Carlos Correa, one of the infielders who does have a pick and not feel that bad about it because you have that extra pick already. You're not giving one up for the pitcher.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting game of chess to keep an eye on entering the offseason. Our next email comes from Alex. He says, "Hi guys, loved the last podcast and the Bobby Dahlbeck talk was interesting and got me thinking, am I crazy to think that I would rather have Bobby Dahlbeck at DH if he can keep up around 110 to 120 WRC plus when Tristan Casas gets called up, as JD has been an average hitter all year except his exceptional April, and I personally can't see JD Martinez improving much and producing more than what he has been this year. Thanks, Alex." I'm guessing he means next year. The problem with Dahlbeck again is the streakiness. Like I think if you're assuming he's going to be August to mid-September Bobby Dahlbeck,
right?
You're going to be disappointed.
If he's that guy, sure.
Yeah, but I think if you're expecting that, right? That's my point. That's my point. Is if you're expecting that, you're going to be disappointed. Yeah, I mean, look, JD Martinez, he is what he is. I don't know what to make of him. I mean, he's positive, guy to have hitting wise in the locker room at least. I wouldn't put it past him to hit better next year, honestly. Like another year coming off of the brutal 2020. Who knows? But I think he's the top 5 hitter in the game that he was from 2016 to 2019? No. He doesn't need to do that to be your DH, though.
He's still a 129 WRC plus. Like that's really good.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that. I think the emailer's point, Alex's point, is that a lot of that is based on when he went off in April.
Okay, yeah. Let me see if I can.
I think his monthly splits. Like he's been a very ordinary hitter since the All-Star break. Like he's like a 700 OPS guy since the All-Star break. So if you look at his splits,
yeah, I'm bringing them up. So his splits. In April, he was 351. April and March, he was 351, 430, 745. May, 306, 373, 429. Yeah, June, he was 253, 303, 485. July, 244, 317, 489. August, 276, 317, 469. September, 291, 352, 519. He was only really bad for like a 2-month stretch there.
Okay.
Even that, it was like he slugged 500 one month and had a 300 average the other. Like,
right.
I don't think he's been as bad as that looks, I would say. Like his OPS plus has been over 110 every month.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I think the other thing is it's tough to judge too because offense is down throughout the game. So that's why you have to look at these league adjusted numbers like OPS plus and WRC plus. Because those are going to tell you how guys are doing against as compared to the league. Our next question is from Harrison. He says, my question concerns what pitchers the Sox should protect before the Rule 5 draft. I know it's early, but some of the minor leaguers involved are easy plays. For instance, starters Brian Bayo, Josh Winkowski, Cutter Crawford, and Victor Santos would probably all be claimed away if not added on the 40-man. I'm in a quandary over Thaddeus Ward recovering from Tommy John. So let's table him for now, and I'm consciously leaving off Chase Shugart. By the way, if you disagree on these names, let me know. Don't worry, Harrison, we will. But it's the newly eligible relievers that I want to look at. Quite a few had good or almost very good seasons in 2021. I count among them these 8. Durbin Feltman, Ryan Fernandez, Frank German, Rio Gomez, Yohan Martinez, Audanier Mosqueda, Brendan Nail, and Caleb Ort. I think at least a third of the clubs in MLB could stash any reliever in this group in their bullpens for a whole season. thus gaining control by the end of 2022. In real life, Red Sox players occupying 40-man slots will be DFA traded, etc., right up to the November deadline. So it's impossible to know how many spots will be available. Therefore, just on the merits of the pitchers themselves, are there any relievers in this group of 8 whom you think must be protected this November? As always, thank you for entertaining my question. I think we're going to get into Rule 5 more later, Ian. So I don't want to do a deep dive on this, but I think this is way too wide a net to cast. Looking basically at guys who had good years numbers-wise. On that list of relievers, I think there are 2, maybe 3 that merit consideration.
I have 2.
So Feltman and German.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, it's like, I don't think you protect Ort. That's why I was saying maybe 3.
No,
but
I mean,
he's
Ort. Like, it's fine, but yeah, the control is a question, and I don't see anything more than like he's a replaceable player, I would say.
Yeah, because here's the thing: is you can't just look at numbers for relievers. You need to look at context, age relative to level, what level they were at. Like I don't care about a relief pitcher's numbers in high A.
And also, like Ort's like what 29. Like
something like that. Yeah, but he was in AAA. I mean, at some point you're in AAA.
No, I know. My point is though, he's a 29-year-old. Like that's if the choice is him or Durbin Feltman, I'm protecting Feltman, for example. Or same thing with like Frank Durbin.
But he's just saying based on merit, do they just? And here's the thing too: is like you're not necessarily adding guys to the 40-man to protect them from being selected. You're adding them to Rule 5 if you think they might stick when selected, and like. Ryan Fernandez isn't a major league pitcher right now. Brendan Nail is not a major league pitcher right now.
Exactly.
It's look.
Well, and I think this is the discussion we're going to have to get into with the position players, with like guys like Gilberto Jimenez, Seta, and Rafaela. Like, could those guys stick for a year? Probably not. But if they get added to a 40-man, it really screws up things for next season if there's a lockout, for example. So, yeah. But we'll talk about that another day.
We'll go into that more deeply. And we've got another email from Al. He says, Chris and Ian, would you re-sign Jose Iglesias for 2022 on a 1-year, $2.5 million contract? He's right-handed, same as Bogarts, Arroyo, and Hernandez, so not a perfect fit. But he clearly likes playing in Boston and fills a need, especially given Christian Arroyo's difficulty staying healthy and the fact that Kike Hernandez is the team's best center fielder. I mean, I'm not against it. I in a vacuum, I need to look at who else is available for second base.
Well, that's the thing is like, if they're going to go out and spend big on a second baseman, if he's going to take like a minor league deal, sure, but I'm not going to.
Well, 2.5 isn't spending big. I mean, 2.5 is what they gave Marwin Gonzalez to be the bench infielder.
Right, but my point is, and he pointed out, is they already have guys for that role under contract. Like Christian Arroyo is under contract, and if you're bringing in an everyday second baseman, you don't need both of them on the bench.
Right, and at some point, it's like, what role is Jeter Downs playing in your organization? Like, obviously, you're not handing him a job out of spring training, but like, I'm okay with second base being a little fluid. Maybe not as much as I was last year for 2022, right? Like, last year, looking ahead to 2022, it's like, yeah, don't go get a second baseman because Downs might be ready in 2022.
Well, I think the problem
he's clearly not yet. But
and we'll get into this in the offseason, is Bogarts really should be moving there, like, and they should go out and get a shortstop, but that's going to be a tough sell given Bogarts is entering more or less a contract year and his agent and everything. And so you're going to have to go, if you go get a second baseman, I would not hate them going out and getting Semien, Correa, someone like that, and, figuring out the middle infield with that. But yeah, Downs, I think, is now, if he figures it out, you figure it out. But I don't think he's going to preclude them if they decide that that's the route they want to go and spend big someone for that position. Because it is, I think, the strongest hitting position on the market is shortstop, and it's not close.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bumper crop of shortstops. Corey Seager,
Story, Correa,
yeah.
Baez, Semien, technically, it's really good. So
let's get to this next email from Andy. He says there's been a lot of talk about Jeter Downs' struggles and that they should probably give him a break for this off. Give him a break, okay, and that we should probably give him a break for this off year. However, I'm reminded of a candid response at the end of 2020 by someone in the Red Sox organization that stated Jeter's effort wasn't 100% there in practice, but that he'd be ready, quote, when the lights came on, end quote. I can't find the quote, but I believe you mentioned it around fall instructs last year. Do you guys think there is more of a reason for concern now, considering his work ethic was called into question last year and the in-game results this season were poor? Have there been any similar concerns regarding his effort in 2021? Can we still expect improvement in 2022 if he's not currently putting the work in? Thanks, Andy. Ian, so the quote was from Billy McMillan at the end of the alternate training site. I don't believe it was about his effort.
No, it was about the way he approached like batting practice and infield and things like that.
So it wasn't like he wasn't trying. It was more like...
I think. I don't remember.
I took it as, look, he approached the alternate training site like it was the alternate training site. Right? Like he wasn't out there like... I don't know. I'm not sounding right here, but I didn't take it as he went out and wasn't trying. That's not how I took it.
No, I don't think I took it that. I didn't take it that way either. And I didn't like when I seen him this year. I have not seen a lack of effort. I just think, as we talked about earlier, like I think there's been some mental. He's been in his own head a little bit with stuff like that, and yeah, that has kind of been what I was seeing. Was just he was just a little like his just timing was off, and for whatever was causing that, I didn't notice any like lack of effort or anything.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, here, I found an Alex Spear tweet that I think has the quote. The quote was, if the stupid thing will load, Billy McMillan on Jeter Downs. He made tremendous strides defensively. His track record of offensive performance indicates that when it's 7:05 and the lights are on, he shows up at the plate. At the time, he said he was a better long-term fit at second, but believes he's capable of playing short based on what he showed. Again, I think it was more that like he wasn't like super impressive at the alt site. Is really what, now that I'm kind of thinking back. I didn't take it, and I could be wrong. I didn't take it as an effort thing. And our last email comes from David B. He, our Patreon supporter, he says, in reading the player pages and scouting reports for pitchers in the system, one item that always seems to come up a decent amount is a pitcher's projection if their control and or command improve. My question is, how does a pitcher typically get their control and or command to improve? Is it mostly just being able to repeat their delivery better as they get more reps? Is it usually a tweak in mechanics? Is it growing into their man muscles? Or is it some combination of all of this? I assume it may be a bit different for each person, but I'm just curious as to how long you wait and watch to see if this improves and if the potential fix is related to how long you wait. Interesting question, Ian, and I'll punt to you on it because there are plenty of guys who it's, throws hard, but what they turn into depends on how the command control profile develops. To me, I always took it more as just it's what their development is, not they need to specifically focus on improving this thing. But feel free to, how does that improve? How do you learn better control and command?
Well, I think though it starts, with a lot of, when you're talking about like high schoolers or like Latin pitchers, where there's obviously a bigger gap between what their present command and future is. It's a lot to do with like those guys are not finished physically growing. They might have a mechanical issue here or there that can be tweaked. Like things like that can obviously, improve command. But I think that, it's not, there's no like one trick to fix it, if that makes sense. It's a case specific thing. And there are some guys who you just don't ever see the command getting there, but there are others where, you look at them, you see the delivery, they tick certain boxes of pitchers that you've seen with good command. And it's like, okay, I think there's things to work with here. They just need to get more reps. They need to throw this pitch more. They need to work with better catchers. There's just a lot at play. And it's hard to narrow down like a specific reason. But yeah, I think it's a lot of it. For me, a lot of when I'm looking at command, it's going off of like the delivery and the pitched traits. Like, if you've got a fastball, it's moving all over the place. A lot of those guys have a lot of trouble commanding that. Like, let's just be honest. Or like, if you're a super hard thrower, the odds are you're not going to have the best command. There's a lot more like Domingo Tapias than Jacob deGroms who can, command 100-mile-per-hour fastball versus, throw it wherever. But yeah, it's things like that. And it's more of like a case by case basis.
Yeah. I mean, look, if there were one way to do it, everyone would do it. Right. So it could be, like you said, it could be a mechanics thing. Could just be, a focus thing. Guys improve their command going from starting to relieving. Right. So, yeah, I mean, interesting question. Good question. Hopefully we kind of gave you a satisfactory answer to that one. And again, podcast at soxprospects.com. That's it for this episode. Thank you everyone for listening. Why do we ever say to amongst ourselves we're going to do a quick episode? It never happens. Red Sox lost. I believe the Yankees won. So the Red Sox are still ahead of Toronto. They're tied with Seattle. It's going to be an interesting weekend, so we'll see how this goes. As always, and actually, Ian, we should give a special shout out here to Podcast Joe 2.0, who is leaving us. Podcast Joe is moving on to greener pastures. He has been invaluable in the assistance he's provided to the website and the podcast specifically. Part of the reason we've been able to do weekly this season is the fact that he was able to do the production. We're going to try to see what we can do going forward on keeping this weekly schedule. Although, like we said, we don't know what we're going to do this off season. Once the minor league season ends, at least. He has done a great job producing, writing show notes, getting the stuff online, fixing our screw ups. And we are going to miss him, but we wish him the best. Moving on. Hey, if you have experience with that kind of thing and want to apply, hit us up, podcast@soxprospects.com if you're interested in producing the show. We can talk about it, but Podcast Joe 2.0, thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure. Stay in touch. We also want to thank for our music, the Ludlow Thieves, for their song All the Money. Listen to it wherever it is that you listen to music. I mentioned the Twitter handles at Sox Prospects, at Ian Cundall, that's IANCUNDALL, and follow me at SP Chris Hatfield. And if you want to support us on patreon.com/Sox Prospects, we would appreciate it. And as always, we want to give a shout out to our $5 level supporters. That'd be Kyle Costigan, Tyler Woodrow, Jeff Trainer, David Nardone, Tim Harding, Bill Stanton, Deb Kendall, Evan Kirkwood, Hurricanes 1, Chris Fox, James O'Hara, Nathan Kenyon, Andrew Wallen, David B., Ben Burnett, Al Mendel, Kevin Catrides, Ben NRI, Paul Denyer, Lendl Martin, Cassandra Bukta, James P. McMahon, Stephen Gregory, James Bailey, Andreas Goldstrand, Corey Perrick, Forrest Perkins, Mark Herman, Aaron Meta, Jeff Harwood, Jimmy Mountain, Brian Cowan, Dusty G., Pavel, Jordan Shabbat, Jeffrey Scruggs, Nicholas Staropoli, Bob Introne, Mike Kawano, Chris Bollier, Curtis Waltman, Michael Stewart, Keith Fox, Caleb Farron, John Kane, and Andrew K. Thank you all for your support. Thank you, Ian. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back in your eardrums probably next week. We'll have end of season wrap up stuff to talk about, some more league lists, and who knows what we'll be talking about as far as the Major League team goes. It's going to be an interesting weekend and potentially a few days afterwards. So stay tuned, y'all. Get back in your eardrums soon.